Taking time out of your busy schedules. This is our annual CSIP meeting where we seek community input. Part of that is actually that it's actually a board meeting. We've never asked the board to sit on stage. We've always had them go back into the community because we kind of want that casual mindset, being able to kind of speak freely and collect that data. But at this time, I'm going to turn this over to Jimmy Jackson, our board president, who will convene the meeting.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Can we stand for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. I'd like to call the meeting to order. If I could, can I get a roll call, please? Here. All right, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, moving on. Dr. Howe, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Just a little bit about I did want to note, too, that afterwards we are going to step into executive session for a minute to get some hirings done. That's it. There's no further discussion after this. And I will use the plug shamelessly. If you are interested in driving a bus or helping us out in this district, as many districts across the country and state, please, if you know somebody, please have them come see us because we can use that help for our children. The format this evening, I wanted to, since kind of things had changed, my world changed a lot about a month ago, learning about an abatement and everything that went along with that. I think it's a unique opportunity for our community to come together as we begin to look at growth and change in our district. The first hour will be dedicated strictly to our community, and the second part will be for the academic. And we'll go with the flow. If it gets cut short and we want to move in the other one, we will. But I do want to encourage you all to participate. There is also a sheet up front because sometimes you come to these meetings, you have thoughts, or if you're like me, sometimes you think of something later. Those links will be active for at least a week. If you think of something and want to add a question later, so we can break it down for us. Stevie Hollinghausen has done a wonderful job in helping us prepare these QR codes and links. And also on the back of that document is the long-term and range planning guide for our district. That's not something new. It's maybe been consolidated and a little clearer. And we'll talk about that later, but those are both sides of the sheet. I did want to take just a moment and thank those of you who have been so supportive, not only me, but our school district, not only in the last month, but during the transition year. Jefferson truly is a wonderful place. I think we're the gem of Jefferson County, very quietly down here doing our business and educating kids for many years as a K through 8, and now adding the high school. We actually had our first class reunion the other night, Friday night, which is wonderful. Class of 2013 was here. We had them here, brought them in for a dinner. Gosh, what a great evening before our football game, and it is amazing to watch our district grow. I did want to introduce our principals are here tonight. They each have a microphone, be moving around to take comments. So when we get to that point, you won't have to step up here. And I do want to encourage you, if you don't feel comfortable in speaking and want to put your information in, we do take a lot of pride in gathering information and helps us make better decisions. I do want to introduce Andrea Hammock and Darren Schaefer, who are up here on stage. Andrea is now our board secretary, and Darren is our executive director of administrative service or academic services. And they will be collecting and writing stuff for me this evening is their role in this. And also wanted to quickly introduce our directors and thank them for being here. I know all the work they put into this on a daily basis is really important to our kids, and it's a lot of hard work, but they do it unselfishly, and they're really growing together as a team. I'm going to segue into this for a moment. Really, I can be honest with you and say Sunday night I wasn't really sure how I wanted this to look, and I just, did a lot of reflection. And I think it's important you know a little bit about myself, and I apologize if I get a little bit emotional in this first part. I always thoroughly enjoyed being a high school principal. I was never sure if I wanted to step into the superintendency, but Jefferson's a special place. I can tell you when I started my career, I was a first-year teacher, first-year assistant football coach at St. Dominic High School. We went 0-10 in our first year of varsity football. I was there when they started the program. We were getting beat 48-4. It was the average score per game. Pretty miserable situation. The head coaching job opened up, and as a second-year educator, I stepped into that role, head football coach, and no assistants on staff. It was a pretty interesting place to be at the time. But I know in working with our kids, we really had one outstanding football player. He was a sophomore transitioning into his junior year, and we were really working with him. Not that he was a big problem, but just being a leader, getting his grades up. And I know that back in the day, and Mr. Rugley can tell you, there used to be like 2 weeks of football camp, so I hadn't even coached a varsity game yet. And my assistant coach and I discussed this young man and said, we've gotten him to a good point here. We need to address the last one. If you know anything about the area, he was kind of from St. Paul. There's a lot of extracurricular activities at St. Paul in the evening, and we wanted to address that with him about some of his habits past, the midnight hour. And I won't go into that conversation, but we were pretty clear and direct about, hey, we need you to not do this, and went through a bunch of things, and we had a great conversation. I will tell you that 36 hours later, I got a call from his best friend said he was dead. His car was wrapped around a tree. He was involved in a drinking accident. And I'll be honest, that kind of shook me to the core. And as a young guy, 24 years old, trying to run a football program, and thinking, what did my words mean? I did a lot of reflection over 2 months of why did I even try to intervene in that thing? He didn't listen. But I came to the conclusion after everything played out, that was the low point of my educational career right there. The past few weeks have been difficult, but that's my standard as far as difficult situations. I do know a couple months after that, I came to the conclusion that as an educator, you have to be willing to say things when it's important. You have to understand that maybe people won't always listen and won't always follow your direction, and I learned that the hardest way possible. And that's really what tonight is about. I have no ulterior motive other than to take care of this school district, take care of our kids, and I'm really thankful for those being here tonight. The second part of me, just as a person, through my dissertation, I got a really nice compliment from a teacher that we had, a professor, that really I didn't even need the class. I was doing a quantitative research, and this was a qualitative course, but we were talking about the paper and everything. She said, the thing I really respect about you and the class and how you write, she goes, you're very direct, and there's no fluff in your paper. She said, do you know how much fluff I pull out of papers, and there's no fluff, and that's just kind of who I am. I also don't like wasting people's time, so the information I have will be as concise as possible tonight, and as clear as I possibly can, and some of the things I think we need to work toward as a school district moving forward. And the last thing is, through my football travels, I've had the unique experience of being around two pretty unique individuals, and one of them was actually voted one of the top undrafted free agents in NFL history, and that's Rod Smith down at Missouri Southern. I got to play with him. I had a locker next to him as a freshman. He was a senior. And to listen to his knowledge, and then on the flip side, as an administrator years later here down at North County, was to work with the Will Compton, who, I don't think there's been a position player out of St. Francis County ever until he did. I know there's another one now with the Cleveland Browns since Will went through it, but to be around two undrafted free agents that have made it to the NFL, guys from small rural, towns in either Arkansas or Missouri, you do a lot of reflection, or at least I did, about, man, what makes them special? What are some common traits that they had? And first of all, they were both great teammates, either Rod to me as a player or what I could see from Will all the way through. But the most important thing is those guys did not make excuses. They were unbelievable. They handled adversity. They almost saw adversity as a positive. How can I make myself better? How can I turn this into a positive for me? Those guys, it was not an accident for them to find the success that they did. I was brought up that way, but to see those two just crystallizes that. I don't expect any sympathy for the job that I do or what the position that we're in sometimes as a district. I look at each and every situation as a challenge, even going back to the death of our player, is that there were so many good things that came out of that it was a miserable situation. Great things can happen. So as we move forward, I don't look for any sympathy. I really look to say, okay, what can we do in an adverse situation to make it better? And I've had great people I've been able to see work through that and how they conducted themselves. And it's amazing sometimes how a student in the form of Will or a teammate really can have an impact on you as an adult. My final motivation, I think we've been very clear as principal of the high school for 10 years and the programs we put in. We value the family first. And then the kids as part of that. I know Alex has done a great job of putting the My Story program in, and if you saw the video before you got here tonight, that is the most important thing. I mean, I'll be blunt, I think our society is so hard on families and so hard on kids. We want to be that different place. That's our priority. Yes, you need money to make a school run, but I guarantee you, and I've said it over and over, if you place the priority of taking care of kids first, you may not be able to see the path that's in front of you, and it'll take you on different directions, but it always works out. It always does. That's been a guiding principle of mine for all these years, and placing kids first is extremely important. I think there's an added layer for the uniqueness of Jefferson R-VII. It's a very unique community, and we'll address some of that tonight, but I also think taking care of our community and our taxpayers is a responsibility of the school in this unique situation where there really is no formal form of government that we can rely on. And that's good and bad. If I could share three main ideas for tonight, to be very clear, again, I'll be as concise as I can. The land where James Hardy is going is prime real estate for that sort of development. It was going to be developed by somebody at some point, and really I can't think of a more stable or established company than James Hardy to come in there. This process hasn't been fun. Nobody wants to be abated. But at the end of the day, as far as a company coming in there, we kind of know what we're getting. It's somebody you can look at with business across the country. So I think them coming to the area is a benefit not only for Jefferson R-VII, Jefferson County as a whole, and really the state of Missouri. I think it's a great addition. That's number one. Number two, that our school is interested in analyzing any growth, program, or tool that will benefit the kids of Jefferson R-VII, Jefferson County, and the state of Missouri. And I think that's a rather broad statement, but I don't think people really get to see us and know us. We know what our community is about. But I think that across the board, for the time that I've been here, we've had such great leadership and such great families that we really do try to work and take care of kids. We may not always agree internally, but I think we usually walk away from the table feeling like we did what was in the best interest of kids and we did the very best we could. And I think that there's some unique opportunity here for us to start exploring. And then lastly, tonight's meeting, I don't know how many answers I will have, probably not many. So as we go through this, we want this to be an avenue for you to provide input for us to speak on your behalf. That's the one thing I think that's positive for the past couple weeks is having conversations really closely with James Hardy and the county and becoming sort of a mouthpiece for you all. And as we go through this, we would like to take those to them and have those questions answered. I know the county has been great to work with over the past week in answering the questions that I've had about either James Hardy or other situations. And so that's been a very positive. I know there's intention to start bringing that road planning plans down to our district when those are made available and the engineers are done with them to bring it right to where it's going to affect the most. That'll be our community. So I've spoken enough about that. I do know that growth can sometimes be difficult. It takes some patience. It takes a lot, but we've done it before. I love this picture. We've gone from the 4 schoolhouses. This is up in Telegraph. I know the high school's not on there, but you look at the names of the buildings and now they've taken over the names that we have here. We've done it before. Growth is not always easy, but I think there's a unique opportunity for us right now, having seen some of the plans that James Hardy and the county have out there, that growth is coming. Even if you look at the 3 lanes coming down, growth is coming. It may be business at first, it may be residential later, it may be other opportunities. There's not a grand plan, but I think there's an opportunity for this school district to work with as a community to prepare for whatever growth is coming as best as you possibly can. My nature is to be proactive instead of reactive, and that's something I think we have a unique opportunity to do now. One of the QR codes that you have is our CSIP plan. It'll link you to our CSIP page, so you can look at that later when you get home. But I did want to kind of walk you through a little bit of this. Mr. Schaefer is giving me some advice on this, and I think I can do it. Okay. So this is the plan. First of all, this started out as a lot of words and standards and very black and white, boring stuff, for lack of a better term. We've got Stevie Holdinghausen up there in the booth, who late last spring I said, when we get you this plan, I want you to put your shine on it and really make it pop. And she did a tremendous job. I want to brag on her and so many people involved with this. I do think it's important to understand that we are a little bit unique in the fact that we are so locally funded for our school district. That is, the influence of Ameren and Boots at Unison, which used to be River Cement, and some of our businesses really prop us up along with our houses. So we do have a very high percentage of locally funded dollars coming into our district. That number is actually just a smidge low because of COVID, but usually it's up around 79, 80%. Of course, we have this wonderful facility here. One of the things I was really proud of last year was our Board of Education trying to look at our mission and vision statement, and then our whole staff, everybody top to bottom coming together in here to talk about the vision that they wanted for a student. And we looked at some different concepts from different organizations, and we came up with what's called a portrait of a graduate. What does a graduate look like coming from Jefferson? And I didn't give any direction on it. We had tables all over the place, out in the hallway, broke high school staff up with elementary staff. What I was really proud of is that they didn't come back and say, try to define what success was and say that the kid had to be a high school graduate and go to college. They had to be doing this. It boiled down to 4 character traits, kept coming up over and over, that if our students leave this school district with these 4 traits, and that is work ethic, perseverance, problem solving, and empathy, that they would put them on a path to be successful. And I was really proud of them for that. So this began to mirror what we came up with our mission statement and our statement of philosophy. And also an academic quote that kept coming up from Karen Koenig is, teach students how to think, not what to think. I think in a society today, instead of trying to get people what to think, teach them how to think, and our youth will be in great shape. Bright future, we have some great data points here. Stevie, this is where I pulled my old one up. Stevie did go in and clean all this up. That's on the PDF, but we take a lot of pride. We use the ACT quite a bit because it's been a consistent score for us as student performance. The state test just changed so much, it's hard to gauge that. We have a very high ACT percentage. We're number 3 in the state of Missouri, small schools 220 to 380. 2 St. Louis schools with 2 completely different resources than we have are a little bit higher than us, but we have a tremendous staff here that does a tremendous job in prepping the kids for the ACT. Of course, high graduation rates. Look at those college credit hours. Again, those are up to date in the current plan. This is a little bit older, but tremendous job by our high school staff and our district-wide staff in getting our kids ready. This is our data points there. This was not done in a vacuum. This is our entire team. We started not this past summer, the summer before, brought some individuals from another district, and our local representative came in the middle of July. Started this process. It took a lot of ups and downs. Really spent last year trying to let our principals and our admin team work. Really have to compliment Ms. Watson and Ms. Bosler coming in late May, early June, and really taking our standards and getting them to a much better place. And then the addition of Mr. Schaefer in July to really tidy this thing up. We got our initial feedback on it, and we're responsible. Long story short, we're responsible for 30 points on this. We got 2 recommendations, but otherwise, even if we don't do that, we would score the full 30 on the plan itself, and there's some uniqueness to it. Embedding in where we've been, the 5 pillars that have guided this district since about 2012, 2013, those were all embedded in the plan. They may not be in the exact form, but we didn't want to get too far away from where we've been. It just needed to be kind of cleaned up a little bit. This is the SWOT analysis of what we're here this evening, and we'll do a community SWOT analysis and a school SWOT analysis. We'll talk about this in greater detail in the educational part of it, and it did have an impact on our decision-making starting last winter into how our staff looked this fall. This is blank. This is for this year's information we put in later this fall. Mr. Schaefer did a great job of going in and identifying our strengths strengths through all the data, and then also the opportunities for growth. You can look at that later. And then you get into this part of it here where the one that, if you look at other district CSIP plans, ours may be a little bit different. I just have a belief, going back to being a high school principal, if you're building safe and you have a respectful learning environment, if you can't have that, nothing else really goes well and nothing else really starts to take off. And so our number one priority in the district, a lot of districts will put their academic goal first. I believe academics are important, but it's up to us as adults, as a Board of Education, our staff, top to bottom, provide a great environment for our kids. So that's really the first set of standards that you're going to see on the CSIP. I'm not going to go any further than that, but this plan is guiding us not only for the current, the future, and we've had a great past that we've embedded in it as well. All right, Mr. Schaefer, I will try to get back to where we are. I also know that Mr. Schaefer and I and our central office staff, we walk into these three sayings that are great guiding things. I was pounded into me as a kid through my dad. Our top quote there, it's amazing what you can accomplish when you do not care who gets the credit. That's from Missouri's only president, Harry S. Truman. I also look at a quote on there. It says, great questions are a much better indicator of future success than great answers. That's why we're here tonight. Ask the questions. We need to hear from you all. Character in the long run is the decisive factor in the life of individual and nations alike. And I love that quote from Theodore Roosevelt, and we look at that as we walk in our door every day. I'll go back to the one thing I think a lot of this centers around. My number one concern, whether I'm your superintendent or somebody else is, or your Board of Education changes over, if you look back at the history of the Jefferson R-VII School District, is that there's really no or limited voting representation when decisions are made either regarding an abatement or regarding housing or how land is plotted. Just my brief interaction with that and just kind of watching Mr. Johnson all those years and going back and studying the history of the last abatement that we had prior to all this happening. I looked through all that information last May and June, so I had a better understanding of how it looked. So if people ask you, what is the number one concern, from my perspective, is the fact, and I think that when you have that decision made on you, I think it just goes back to my, I used to teach government to freshmen, and you think about the Revolutionary War and why we started, the old saying, no taxation without representation, and here we are. That does sit with me, and I wanted to be very upfront about that whether I'm just I'm not only your superintendent, I'm a resident of the district for about 10 years. I have kids in the district. It's a great place to be. And so I see it from a lot of different angles. But I think if you just kind of pull the emotion out of all this and look at the core central problem that this district will have through growth is the fact that where's the representation? And that it is not like coming from your city. Just having a conversation with the local school district today and about some of the abatement issues they've had in the past, the difference is it was through their city that it happened. It wasn't another entity doing it to them. And so there is a difference there. So if any of that can resonate going forward, I just appreciate your consideration in that. Kind of just a few notes here. Last abatement, it was through the county council. There was one vote that represented this district. I think we're District 5, correct? Kind of sounds like the Hunger Games. We're District 5. And then the past couple of weeks, there was no vote from any resident in the district that was able to make that decision. I will be very blunt. I was going to go into great detail, but I think that you guys saw the video originally. I can tell you that when I got notification of what a Chapter 353 was on September 11th to that first informational meeting we had on September 14th, one of the great things I had over the past year was to transition and not only working with Mr. Johnson, but to meet a lot of people across the state of Missouri that have an extensive background in school finance and in how schools function. And so I did a lot of phone calls, for those days to say, what are we looking at here? And they just said, there's just not much you can do on an abatement. They can do whatever they want with you on that, and those challenges usually go through. That changed when the word pilot was introduced into the 353. And if you look at the 353 itself, that's what we were truly concerned about, and there was no precedent in the state of Missouri for that happening. We did lose our attorney right away because of conflicts of interest. So I spent a couple days without an attorney trying to sift through that. And then we got hooked up with a really nice law firm that understood the 353. I felt like we gave Crystal a chance to pull that language out of there, and we did what we had to do. We did not want to get into a lawsuit over that, but really we weren't going to have to sue just for the Jefferson R-VII school district. We couldn't allow that precedent to take, moving one funds from one district to another, that the language clearly stated that. So I will say in summary, as that time period went on, we started to have a conversation with Crystal City that weekend, which I thought was a very healthy conversation. I think the three things I took from it is we do have the opportunity with nothing, really no leverage on our end at this point, because really they could have just done and voted, that we ended up with some ability to meet with James Hardy and speak with them, and we have had some conversation, very positive conversation with them. And then also the county has been a big asset, and I think those have been very positive conversations. There was no pilot in the 353 that was approved the other night. That language, we said we would have to sue if that word pilot was in there, so they did honor that and took that out of the language. And then we also got to extensive review of the James Hardy plans and the impact on the community and county. You have to be cautious with those numbers. The things I like about James Hardy in going through that process was, I think there's some similarities with myself. I don't like to overpromise things. And I think they're very cautious about the information they give out. And I don't want to quote them exactly, but basically they don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. I think that's a healthy mindset. And I kind of go back to that original statement that that area is going to be developed. And I think James Hardy is about as solid as you'll find because they're a known commodity and you're not dealing with somebody else that's an unknown. So there's a lot of positive to take from that. My quick analysis, three things. There's no or limited voting on tax abatements. We discussed that already. That goes back to Chapter 100 in 2009 and the 353 on this one. Annexation, the effect on the Jefferson R-VII school district, and I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. And I think for the short term here is the growth and the changes on the traffic. I'm as concerned about that as anybody, having a young driver out there myself, just pulling down to exit 170, and I know it's a difficult, it can be kind of a difficult. I know there were some people that really fought hard to get that speed limit reduced years ago because of some of the catastrophic accidents that were happening through there. I believe that has made a difference. But that's just my analysis, that's my opinion. And the effective abatement on his community school, and I don't take this word lightly, we are a community school. I think one of the messaging things we can look at here is, there's things, having worked in another school district as the district activities director at North County, being involved at Potosi, strong communities, but when you really look at it, most of the schools aren't actively working with their Little League programs to make that program happen on school property and kind of both using their resources to upkeep that opportunity for kids. You'll see in the CSIP plan, one of the weaknesses I see in this area, living in Farmington, we lived in Farmington about 10 years ago, before we moved here. Well, I said, let's get a play set. I go, why? There's a nice park right there. We just go over and play there. I don't need to spend on it. Move out to Jefferson, I'm like, we're going to have to buy a play set. There's really no great playground, so that's something the school would have to incur if they want to provide that. The track is still used. Most schools shut their track down during school hours for safety reasons. We still keep ours open because it's a great place for our community to walk. The batting cages, we are responsible for the upkeep on that. The Blue Jay Bombers, the community basketball Little League, that's hand in hand with the school. We pay for an SRO, and we've hired an intervention specialist a few years ago who's now our middle school principal, and then Mr. Rothweiler has stepped into that. But those are mental health positions that we're paying for as a school district. And then simply like if you think about the roads and not being a part of a city or anything that's helping you offset those funds, and you'll see tonight if you stay for the academic or the school part of it, we're getting into that road planning. We will have to incur that cost, whether it's down on 61, if we put a stoplight or some version of to help with traffic control in the morning, and then the cut on Blue Jay Way being proposed, or any other of those traffic changes, the school will have to incur those costs even though they might be on a county road or a state road. And I think that's a little unique. And I think that I just want to start planting this seed that if you do an abatement, not just affects the community, you affect the community, not just the school. I kept hearing, well, the school. I get it, but we are a community school. we represent our community on some level. I'm finding out quickly when Mr. Johnson said, "You are the de facto mayor in this town, are you ready?" And I said, "I think so." And I've gotten that lesson really, really hard the last month about what that means. And as hard as it's been, I know what a great community it is. I am enjoying it. But an abatement affects not only the school, it does affect our community. I go back to the statement earlier. Our school is interested in analyzing any growth, program, or tool that will benefit the kids of Jefferson R-VII, Jefferson County, and the state of Missouri. And so what I'm here to tell you tonight is that, again, I don't have all the answers, and I think there's a bigger process to this. And I want to take a moment and thank our Board of Education. They are very professional in how they conduct their business, and they speak up more and allow me to kind of work through it, I think, than most people are aware. But I did get a call from Mr. Jackson this morning. We had a communication. We also had our board, this was before we had our meeting this morning to plan for our board meeting next week. We do that monthly. Is that looking at putting the umbrella of this concept into this, that we will look to form, we will be recommending next week to form a committee to study the effects of growth within the boundaries of the Jefferson R-VII School District and how that looks. And to be honest, I go back to my original statement about kids. We're doing this on the benefit of kids. We don't know how this path will look. I can't tell you tonight exactly how that recommendation will look. I have some thoughts that I'm not ready to share yet because I think I need to think it through a little bit more and consult some people that really understand this business. But the one thing I have found through this process is we have so many intelligent people in this school district that I believe have their hearts in the right place and trying to take care of the kids that have been so supportive over the last few weeks, that I think starting to pull them into one umbrella will be a healthy thing so we can see all the different points of view, and also just make sure that our community is informed on what they're looking at. I can personally I can't spend my career here as superintendent doing what I did that last month. It's not really who I am. I like to be proactive instead of reactive. I understand in life you don't always get what you want, but I think an informed constituency is a healthy thing. I think this provides us a unique opportunity to do this. And quite honestly, I don't want to go through that again. I want to have those great conversations. And as a whole, you know, if the Hardy Project comes in and you see everything that could happen around it, the abatement over that period of time probably won't be a big deal. And I'm very careful to say that we have never supported the abatement. We supported the project of James Hardy. But when you start looking at those plans, I think those discussions need to be had up front instead of waiting to the back end and kind of throw it in your lap and then really us being made to be the bad guy in this deal, and we just wanted information. So I'm going to recommend that we have a committee to review all this stuff going forward. Again, I don't know how that looks, but that's kind of where I'm at. The proactive measures that we can do today, first of all, tonight, ask or submit questions related to the following. And that is, you'll have another opportunity to pop into a QR code here in a second. And you can use that throughout the next week. You may think of something Sunday night, watching Sunday night football, something may trigger, and you go ahead and punch it in. We'll gladly accept those. But tonight, if you can give us information, I kind of switched the priority here because I think we have that unique opportunity and to be that voice for our community. The effect of roads and traffic within the Jefferson R-VII School District and the outer road and exit 170. You know, I read a great book about a Navy captain, how he ran his ship, and sometimes the people that are out there that you may not think have the greatest input and knowledge can provide the greatest, solution to a problem, and I really believe in that. Better understanding of our district and how no or limited voting on tax abatements, better understanding of annexation, and lastly this is the opportunity for us to communicate proactively with concerns or questions to the county, James Hardy, et cetera. We just want to be that voice. We want to be prepared, and we want to be ready to roll. Really, at this time, if you wanted to pull that up, and if you had information you wanted to put in as we go through this, I'm going to shift gears here. I've probably spoken enough, and kind of open us up for a community forum. And I would like to start with the roads aspect of it. The long story short is that there's no formal plans out there at this time that they're able to release. And just a lot of discussion on where they're at. I was at the county council last night, county board, or I guess their county council meeting, and they are looking to perfect a bill. Basically, it looked to me, what I'm reading, and I could be completely wrong on this, is that they're consolidating all the funds available and putting that into the hands of the county to kind of start overseeing that. And if you've lived in the area, you see the surveyors out there. That is related to James Hardy. The engineers are in charge of the plans right now before we can get them out. But it's going to affect our outer road, and I kind of get some of those names mixed up, but it's basically extending down from the hospital, that a lot of that truck traffic will come down into our district onto 170 before it heads up. And if you live out here, you already know we have heavy truck traffic there, and those sight lines aren't great. So those are things I think as constituents of the community, spoken to some of you kind of in one-offs, and I'm hoping you'll kind of speak up tonight. Our principals have the microphones. Is there anybody that would like to kind of start the concerns or thoughts on the road discussion? We would love to hear from you.
So I would just like to throw out there that if you're coming northbound on 55 and you're getting off at 170, wrong time of day, it's just horrible, you know. Other than that, it's not that bad if you're coming southbound, but going, you know, coming from the south, going northbound and trying to get off on 61, 67, that's a mess, just already as it is now.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have concerns about them opening that outer road there. I live there on the outer road. We're going to have excessive truck trafficking down there. We're going to have additional from Hardy. We're going to have Kim Pazera's trucking. They're going to be taking that route also, I guarantee it, because of it's a shorter route for them to Bootsy. And it'll save them money and mileage and all that, so it makes sense. So we're going to have probably 200 trucks a day probably running down through there, if not more. So, and we got buses that turn around at the end of the road down there, so we got that concern. It's just, we need a stoplight for sure up there at 61 and where Castle Acres comes out right there, or something aggressive needs to be done there for sure.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Castle Acres is right by the commuter lot?
Castle Acres is what starts where the community parking lot is and runs, that is the outer road.
And I, you know, we haven't had this discussion, and I've had my eyes open a little bit more as I've had a daughter that's turning 16 and all that, and driving down to see a friend back there and then coming out on a Saturday night, I'm like, this, you know, as an adult, sometimes you're like, you know, I can handle this, but I see that as a problem too, and I am curious to see what the adjustments are on that. I know I've been kind of verbally told what kind of their thoughts are, and I was encouraged to hear that there was maybe some other thoughts in case the first plan A doesn't work. They are looking at those solutions, but I think that has to be noted over here is that exit by the commuter lot, Castle Acres, up out of there, trying to turn either right or left back onto Highway 61. I think that has to be a big part of this. And then, Mr. Jackson, I'm going to throw you under the bus here, I guess, and just say that, you know, you even told me coming up, you get off at 00DD sometimes to avoid what Mr. McAllister had mentioned earlier, to avoid that northbound exit onto 170 because of the limited sight there. And I think that has to be a real point of interest as well. And something I can kind of relay of our community concerns. But I think this is a great start to the conversation. Mr. Pruitt, anything else?
We're just going to have to put restrictions on that road, like Jake brake restrictions, and probably we need to try to get restrictions on other trucks using that road, really, if at all possible. Because when Bootsy lets out, in and out, and then when they're on their outage time, there's even more excessive traffic down through there when they're working on the ovens and all that.
Gotcha.
So it's going to be kind of nuts around that road. And it's going to be basically the new Highway 61 in my eyes. I just don't understand why they don't save the taxpayers money and have them come out Airport Road. That's one of the big frustrations I see about it. I understand they don't want to go down in front of the hospital. We'll send them back the other way.
I do think there's some plans to maybe have stuff come in the backside. So would you kind of mention that too about the airport road? And I need just make a note that clarification on the back entrance that comes in as far as, I just need clarification on that because there was mention at that meeting that day, for those of us that were there, that was discussed, but I'll be honest, I didn't pay that much attention. I was looking at some other things that were going on that day, but I think that's why we're here tonight. Clarification on that second entrance, specifically tied to either Airport Road or into James Hardy. And I have one point here. You know how you drive around, you kind of think it's a question to ask later, but there's nobody to ask. What is a Jake brake? Okay, gotcha. Thank you. I will sleep tonight. Thank you. Somebody who had a question down here. Yes, sir.
Just to clarify just a little bit, I've been involved with the Hardy Project. I'm on the Port Authority, and we've been studying this for 3 years. The entrance off of Highway, let's see, let me get this straight. The entrance back behind Weber, the one that the trucks goes, that's going to be the traffic that will be carrying inbound trucks. Okay. And then the airport road is going to be primarily for the employees. And then the third one that you're discussing is going to be for the exiting trucks. And if you've looked at the plan, there are parking places for 198 semis on one side of that and 98 rail cars on the other side of it. So it is a big deal. It's going to be a big employer. It's difficult to see growth. It's sometimes scary to see it. Sometimes a lot of people would like to say, well, let's just keep things the way they are. But that just doesn't happen. So this is a good opportunity for the community, and there is an awful lot of planning going on as far as connecting 61 and the intersections that you have. We've got people from the state, not we, but the state has people that are studying those. We need to wait and see what they come up with because they're the experts at that, and then maybe we can comment on it from there.
Thank you. So real quick, Bill, you said the inbound from Weber is the inbound truck traffic?
Yes. Here. What'll happen, if you're familiar with VFW, where the VFW is, that road will be straightened out, and it'll come out on St. Pius Drive. Where the old concrete plant was, there's a turn lane there. It will connect into that turn lane that goes on to 6167 at that light. And that is where the majority of the inbound trucks will come. Now, the other thing is there's a 1 mile long, what do you call it? I can't think what you call it. It's a oh shoot, what do you call it? Where it's going to be a grade that's going to bring in raw material from the top of that hill.
Oh, the conveyor belt.
Conveyor belt, thank you. Yeah, conveyor belt, a 1 mile long conveyor belt from the top of that hill. So there's going to be an awful lot of stuff that is not brought in from the outside.
That's very true. That's a great point.
So those things will be coming in there. And then again, Airport Road, if you've been in front of the hospital at any time around 4 o'clock, it's backed up all the way to Airport Road anyway, so you don't want to bring trucks in and out of there. That's not going to work. The shifts, they're going to try to work the shifts around the change of shifts at the hospital to try to alleviate some of that, but that would be primarily employees. And then, like I say, the outbound trucks are going to be the ones that you're discussing.
No, I appreciate that. Somebody else.
I can talk loud. I was just going to back up what that gentleman was
Go ahead and speak because we are recording.
Okay, I was just going to back him up. That bus route was my bus route for many, many years. Just trying to pull out of the outer road is dangerous. Just trying to pull from Cement Road onto 61, I have waited from anywhere from 4 to 7 minutes, and that is not an exaggeration. And I'm sure many parents that I was late picking up their children were wondering where I was in Selma Village, and that was because I was struggling to get out of Cement Road.
Thank you. Mr. Pruitt.
He brought up a valid point. He was talking about like 61 and all that, and it kind of light went off my head. Why don't they put on and off ramps right there at 61 where Hardy's at? You know, right by the hospital? I mean, that would make more sense to me because they can just come in and come right in.
MoDOT looked at that, and it's unfeasible.
Hey, Bill. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, MoDOT looked at that about 2 years ago. They had a presentation at the Festus Library, and they had all these plans of how it would work, and they said it just would not work there. There's just too much traffic out of I-55 off the Cloverleaf. The Cloverleaf's going to totally be changed. It won't be a Cloverleaf anymore. There'll be a flyover that comes off of 67 heading north onto 55. And so there just isn't room for it. Now, you have noticed that the plan does call for 55 to be extended to 3 lanes 1 mile past the current Cloverleaf. So they have studied that, and that's the reason for that. I agree with you, because I even said the same thing to them. They said it's just not possible. That's what the engineers said.
I do know I had asked about the, I kind of look at the other way down by Wholesome, because they put a one-way overpass, if that was anything. So they said there was no plans at the time. But again, I'm not an expert on that, so.
I mean, I could still see that working. I mean, they could put a truck lane in there just for Hardy.
Yeah.
I mean, just point blank, they could do
I
that.
think we've got it noted, correct?
There is one more possibility that they discussed. I don't know whether you know it or not, but Larry Goodwin bought a lot of that property along the Omni Farm. And if you have ever walked the railroad tracks, or if you walk the railroad tracks that go into the recycling, I don't know, that little plant on 61 where they had the chlorine leak, there's the possibility you could put a road off of I-55 on underneath those underneath the highway through those railroad tracks over to there. And I've asked them why they didn't do that, and I haven't gotten an answer on it. But that would, I mean, it would be a good solution for things coming north and south. It's just they got to get under I-55 along those railroad tracks. And to date, the railroad has not agreed to abandon that railroad, so you got more people to deal with.
I just think there's other solutions than sending them down that outer road. I mean, that's going to be a cluster. I mean, that's going to be an interstate of tractor trailers.
We'll walk the railroad and see if we can talk them into it.
Well, if I walk the railroad, I'll get fired.
Yes.
I would just like to say that while they're talking to all these experts who are expert engineers and expert whatevers, I really hope that they come talk to us expert R-VII people and let us talk on our community that we are the experts of.
Thank you.
MoDOT does have those things, so when you have them, go to them.
Yes, Jason.
The railroad did give Hardy their easement all the way down through there. They actually did something that they've never done before. They just give the easement instead of buying the easement. So there is, I guess, a way for them to do that, Bill, if they needed to. It's there. I mean, I work for the railroad, so I know. I guess the other thing is 2 years ago, if MoDOT was having this at the Festus Library, was that still under Project Redbird that nobody knew about, or was that under Hardy?
I think it was
It was under the expansion of the highway to three lanes each direction.
yeah, I don't think it was related to the Project Redbird at all. I could be wrong on that. But I know I went out there and I thought it was all about the 3-lane expansion down,
Okay.
which is one reason I'm hoping that we can have those meetings here on our campus, because I think the growth or the changes as far as traffic will affect our community. So I was encouraged to hear that, working with the county, we'll hopefully have those here on our campus, and our community can come right here. Anybody else on the roads? Yes, sir. Mr. Wolk. Get him a microphone.
Yeah, I think my main comment on that is I'm worried about the 3 o'clock and the 7 a.m. I mean, you're going to have River Cement starts 7 a.m., ends at 3 p.m. Then you're going to have a lot of young drivers, 7 a.m., 3 p.m. going through that intersection. That's really where my thing is. I mean, I love that you're going to work around the hospital, but to be perfectly honest, I'm more worried about the kids than I am the hospital. So, I mean, I'm worried about both, but I'm definitely worried about the kids that are going to be driving at 3 p.m. because, I mean, they're going to be going back and through there. We got buses going back and through there. I think what we need to look at is, bring that up, but also look at if there is, maybe River Cement, maybe we talk to them. Maybe we can move times for them, maybe move times when Hardy's letting out, because I have a hard time believing that employees that you're telling them to go Airport Road and they're going to get backed up at the hospital and everybody else, that they're not going to find another way out, and they'll take that outer road because that's the easier way. So something to think about.
So one more thing, what's the name of the equipment manufacturing company there on Industrial Drive? What's it? Good Earth. They're expanding. They're almost doubling their employment. So it's not just hospital employees. It's all the other industries that are down that street. And I hardly ever go to the hospital except for biscuits and gravy in the morning. And so it's more than just hospital. It's a lot of traffic right through there.
Anybody else on the roads? Yes, Laura.
I think there's a little bit of preaching to the choir here this evening. We're all concerned. We're all residents here. Bill made a very good point. When they have the public forums, the public hearings, the public comment things, show up. Go
Absolutely.
to that, because is there anybody here from the State Highway Department, from MoDOT this evening? No, they don't know, and I'm not going to say they don't care, but we're low level. They've got a bazillion things going on all over the state, including the Harness Bridge. But
Stevie, can we bleep that out later? Thank you. All right, we're good to go. Proceed. Let's watch our language.
But the point I'm making through a joke is it's great for us to have these meetings here, but put your voice where it can do some good. Go to those hearings, go to those meetings, go to those informational forums and stuff, or send an email and say, I have concerns about this, this, and this, and this. Just make your voice heard where it can count more. Thanks.
Thank you, Laura.
See, the problem with a lot of this Hardy plant, it was Project Redbird, so it was all under the table, where a lot of it was not enough light shedded on it for everybody to know about it. Because I didn't know about it until probably a month and a half ago. I was like, what is going on now? So, it was kind of, a lot of the stuff was not publicized.
I will shut up after this, I promise. But the county council, those people, they have meetings twice a month, regular meetings, and twice a month most of the time work sessions, and those are published and they're open to the public, and they've been discussing it. The reason why it wasn't any more broadly introduced than that is because I can tell you there's 2 more projects that are going on that are on the works that are really huge, but you're looking at trying to buy land, you're trying to make deals work that won't work if the general public is made aware of them. And so it's just part of business that you have confidentiality agreements that you have to sign between the parties and so forth. You violate those, you've lost the opportunity for the business.
But the problem is taxpayers pay for all.
Again,
Everybody should have a voice in it too.
Watch for the council meetings, because they do discuss a lot of this, and they have to discuss it out in open meetings.
Bill, I'm going to ask a quick question here. You said there's 2 other projects.
Yeah, they're not in Jefferson's area. They're in the port area, in Herculaneum.
Okay. Yes, sir. Mr. Glass.
I sit on the Jefferson County Labor Council, so we knew some of these things, but never in any of the talks, and I think it gets back to us not being a city. They brought people in from all over the world with James Hardy. Never once did they talk about down here. They were concerned. I can tell you the president of the company right away turned around a group of guys and said, we are not bringing trucks in front of that hospital. That was clear. That was it. There was no discussion. He said, you figure out a way or this project isn't going anywhere. But I don't think they ever brought them down here
Not to my knowledge.
to see, it's easy on paper to say, we'll just make that road go through. But do they know what all is fed into that road? So.
I appreciate that, Greg.
Mr. Haug, I'd like to say something real quick.
Yep,
Just
go
in
ahead,
regards
Ms.
to this.
Watson.
There's a lot of discussion going on about what our constituents, what we can do. I think we also need to look internally into what we can do as a school district to alleviate some of these stresses that are manageable within us. Time is a factor I think we can manage within our school. We can look at what's safe for our kids traveling these roadways and to alleviate some of those stresses. If we know river cement is starting at 7 a.m., maybe we have to shift our days back a little bit to make it safer for our kids. I know as a person, I don't want to be at work any later than I already am, but ultimately, if the buses are struggling with traffic, we need to look at things we can control as a school district instead of asking these multi-million-dollar companies to change the way they do business as well.
The other thing I do want to point out, though, is that our high school schedule is built around the ATS. We can't bend off that. And I know that I've been approached like starting school later for the high school. There would have to be a philosophical change of bumping first hour to the end of the day and sending our day into like a 3:30 exit, which then takes more of our kids who have the early release for different activities out of our classrooms. So I will say alongside that, I think part of the school planning, we'll give a glimpse tonight because we have been working with, this is outside of the James Hardy thing. We've been looking at our road planning hard the last 6-7 months. And I know our architect has taken our input and is looking at those plans to give kind of a snapshot there. I know that morning is an issue. I think it's unbelievable that between Brent being down there, I know he just stepped out, and then the way our public kind of manages that turn in the morning, it still just makes me, I just have a sick feeling in my stomach watching that morning. Kudos to our staff this summer for spending a lot of time to fix the afternoon flow. The adjustment of 5 minutes at Danby and the way we manage things. The afternoon part of this is awesome now. Like, I always was frustrated as a high school principal to watch our kids be dismissed at 2:35 and our parents and kids sitting on Blue Jay Way till almost 2:55 while others exited. I found that to be just tough to watch. And for us to come together and fix that, what we could control, Ms. Watson, was so powerful. I agree with you, but I do think I do want to piggyback that some of the things that dictate our school start times around here are us getting kids to opportunities at other campuses at the high school. I just want you to be aware of that. One final thought here, then we'll go to the next one. And then please use that QR code and send any thoughts or comments in. We do look at those. And, to go back to the old dissertation I went through was you're looking for themes, and there's usually the common theme keeps popping up here, and that does help us. Darren and Andrea is writing as fast as they can. Anybody else for last comment? All right. Annexation or abatement and the no or limited vote, that's also in there too. Does anybody have any I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. We know this is an issue, and I think that's where the committee comes in to look and see how that affects our community. And the committee itself will be more than just looking at that. I think there will have to be sort of this, what are all the resources that we have, what are all the entities we have, and see where we're at, and become that voice for our community, and try to look at all the, I go back, I make no bones about it. I grew up, my dad was a football coach for many years, very successful, and, if you hear him talk about developing an offense or defense, you always plan for the worst. Oh, you have to. And so that's my nature, and then usually that never happens, but you're ready for it just in case. And so I think that's where that committee will look at all the benefits, all the things that could be an issue, and that's really the hope there, to be as prepared as we can. But does anybody have any comments or thoughts on this statement here? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because I think it's pretty clear cut. There's kind of black and white that we just haven't had a seat at the table at the last one. But does anybody have any comments that would help us out tonight? And please always, hit send on information we may need later. It's as exciting as anticipated. So that's why we went the roads first, because that is the one thing I think we can have a voice in. And I think Laurie said it well. We are the experts in R-VII, and we do know our community very well. And hopefully that will be a better process for us moving forward. All right. It is. What time do we have here, Darren? Okay. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to move. If you would like to leave it to the community, I'm just going to let you leave. I'm going to move into the school one since our crowd is what it is tonight. My final thoughts on this one, though, we cannot do this alone. We need to hear from our community. We need to be professional and informed. Try to keep the emotion out of it. You see things that maybe you're not understanding, or just really watch what you're putting online. You show up at meetings, be as informed as we can. That's the other thing I see through the committee, is trying to inform our public. We do have the podcast center. We do have board meetings that we can send to our constituents as we get information. I don't think I envisioned some of that with the podcast center when we put it in, that Stevie brought to our, we had been doing videos. I learned that through COVID, that videos and hearing my voice instead of, you having to read a letter as a parent was a big deal. And so we've used that model. But Stevie came and said, here's some podcasting ideas, that this might be a really valuable tool for all of us to inform our community. And then also the proactive engagement, that's going to come in the form of the committee recommendation. Those are my final thoughts on the community engagement here. School CSIP, we're going to skip the 10-minute break. Again, you have a QR code on that sheet if you want to add into our annual SWOT analysis. Just a brief overview on our district finances. The historical assessed valuation of the district, you can kind of see, and it's kind of ironic. Ameren back in 2010-11, can you see the mouse up there? Back in 2010-11 was kind of a boom when this district was really struggling. Our district went from 157 to 199 for a year. It did scale back. There was a lot of new construction at that time, and it was almost like a saving grace for the district. And over time, you kind of see a trend upwards. You see a little bit of drop. Right now, we're at 229. That's even with an $8 million reduction from Ameren over last year, where they were last year. So that's healthy for the district. I can tell you that that's the difficult part of this job. When when Ann and I were sitting there, Ms. Hampton and I were sitting there with Mr. Johnson last year, and we said, tell us what you think on what your prediction from the AV is. He goes, well, the Ameren situation, it's anywhere between 190 and 225. And I said, well, how are you supposed to build your budgets off that information? I think it's important we don't forget the Ameren situation. I believe it's real. I had a conversation with the county assessor yesterday, kind of where that's at. I believe they have filed for it to close down in October of 2024. I don't know exactly where that stands, but I take people at their word. They say they're closing, and the impact on our district is going to be felt. And again, it's also, you look at the abatement thing, when you look at the years when that could start as a reference, I think I could actually retire before that even kicks in if I do my math right. So that's the decisions we're making today, just trying to keep your ears open and listen to our constituents. I've heard from 2 different constituents in the last 24 hours that says it's really important for this community to understand the decisions we're making today will have an impact on this district for the next 50 years. And it's really important that we take the time to consider that, and that's a very powerful statement. I show you this historical assessed valuation. Also, I think we've been good stewards of the money. I think if you were here for Tom Pasarkowitz and our tax hearing, most school districts, after all the ESSER funds were handed out, are sitting, a healthy school district sitting around 42% on reserves. That's not uncommon. We have built our reserves to help offset the Ameren situation, hopefully bridge that gap to Hardy. My game plan changed as transitioning into superintendent after getting hired. I'll be honest, I really questioned whether I should take the job. I was at South Iron when that was going to heck. I did not want to be a part of it. After a lot of thought and prayer and talking to superintendents not of this area, they said, don't compare Jefferson to South Iron and that situation you dealt with years ago. It's a completely different deal. And so I trusted them, and next thing we start getting wind of a possible plant moving in, and so we kind of pulled back on our transition from losing Ameren to what our district was going to look like going forward to, we're kind of in limbo right now, to be honest. We have to keep looking at our AV and keep preparing for that transition time, and I'll feel a whole lot better once a shovel goes in on James Hardy for this school district. I'm just going to be blunt about that, to bridge that gap. So we are in a little bit of limbo, but that being said, we did move a little extra money from our reserves over to Fund 4, and our intention is to attack the roofs on, we need to finish off the Danby Gym and the Platten roof and try to get that done with the monies we came up with last year, and we're fortunate enough to be given from our taxpayers across the board. We We want to be very respectful. I don't see it as our money. I see it as a taxpayer money, and we need to be very smart and respectful of that. But I do know our reserves could be a little higher if we wanted them to be, but we put it in a fund for with the idea of taking care of those roofs while we have that opportunity. The CSIP project planning, this is nothing new, but I just felt like it needed to be put in a different format for our public to understand a little bit better. At some point, I envision us coming to the district and just going back to those original pictures of the growth of the district. The craziest part, and maybe Alex can verify this, he just finished his school finance class. It's a whole lot of fun, Alex. I took it like 15 years ago, and I think I remembered some stuff, but I remember distinctly that schools are a little different than your normal household. You want to have that debt kind of continued out for growth. You don't want to get in a situation where your debt goes away and then suddenly you're coming back and having to raise the taxes again to do it. So I do hope, and I think the district was extremely intelligent a couple of years ago to pull back when they got the news of Ameren, to pull out of a no tax rate increase bond issue, given the status that we couldn't guarantee that with the Ameren tax rates. But once Hardy puts a shovel in the ground, I would look for, some of these plans to come forth and the potential for another bond issue coming forward to look at the health of the district and how that looks. And I know that that's on the back of your sheet. I've kind of put it in three different categories. Number one, with the projects that require a bond issue, and I put the little line in there that really has to do with the road expansion. Really, we don't have that city to come in and help us out with that, so we have to do it ourselves. There's always been talk of the back road expansion around Danby. I'm not showing anything like that tonight because I don't know how that serves us as we currently sit as a place to drop students, because you'd effectively have to you'd have to do a lot of different work back there to do that. So I know Vince is working on that for some different options there, so I'm not prepared to share anything there. But I do know that's part of our planning. The new entrance to the high school, and I'll give you kind of a sneak preview of what we're looking at here in just a second, but also the addition of a stoplight down at Highway 61. I want to make sure it's very clear. Those numbers from 2021, they're not the same now. I have not done any investigating on what those numbers would be. I just want our community to know those plans are here and we're still moving forward with those when we have the opportunity. Of course, then you had the football concessions and bathrooms. That was introduced in October 2021. The key and door updates, JHS cafeteria expansion. That is not a super huge, that would be kind of relatively from a construction standpoint, kind of, I don't want to say easy to do, but very manageable to increase but I still think that falls into a bond issue. The potential relocation of the high school softball field to the JHS baseball field and possibly looking at turf, that would have to, I believe, has to be in a bond issue. And then just asphalt, specifically the Danby playground and tennis courts back there to redo I guess what's getting the term the prison yard, unfortunately. Looks a little rough back there. It's hard for a tennis dad here to look out back and see what's going on back there. Darla and Ann said, hey, look, and they had a little picture of some beautiful tennis courts put on the picture one day, and I kind of smiled, but anyway. Then I kind of broke it out into a second part the projects that may need to go to a bond issue and/or when the opportunity presents itself, and that's high school interior painting. Hoping that cost is going down with all the wonderful artwork that Michelle Thompson and her group are doing in the high school. It's beautiful. Alex and them have done a great job of getting that done. Additional security cameras throughout the district. Some of this may be getting a little bit antiquated. I'm not real sure. JHS communication system, that's kind of down in this area. We're a little bit weak. HVAC replacements, that's kind of ongoing as well. We had to replace a few on the roof. I talked to Steve Walters, did a tremendous, he's not feeling well tonight. But we lost like 2 or 3 units last year right away. So that there can't be something right about that. So we spent an extra $6,000. They pulled the tops off or played a certain part that you couldn't see. And they found several of those and they pulled off to be cracked. And then also the pipes up there with where our finances were for an extra about, I think, $7,000 or $8,000, where you're able to, if you go up on the roof now, they're actually encompassed in PVC pipe. The original foam had fallen off, so that's supposed to be kind of a lifetime deal. So hopefully that has put some ease on our units up on this roof. But the HVAC thing, as I've come to learn, you just hold your breath on. 2 projects, of course, the platen roof and sewer replacement. That is part of what we're looking at getting done this year. We were able to do the floor resanding, which came in awesome. If you haven't seen the gym floor over there at the middle school, it was so well done. And then we also have the sound system is here, and technology has gotten to the point where basically there'll be like this ball hanging over the end near the parking lot, that wall, and it will be able to fill that gym. The sound technology is amazing. It'll have a Blue Jay head on it. That is here. Of course, like anybody else, it's hard to get people to come in and do things with everybody kind of booked out. We anticipate doing that the last week, the first week of November, to get that done and that sound system up and ready for basketball season over there. And then, of course, the Keepy Gym roof. Mr. Johnson and I had extensive discussion. We decided to put it off this year and move those monies to Fund 4 for the simple reason that if we were to do that, it would happen during the school year. So we're hoping to put those bids out in the near future, RFPs out, and hopefully get that done early in the summer. We will see. And then lastly, some things that came up last year. You know, what does our Little League facility look like long term? I still think there's a role and a place for it, just personally. But I think not only working with the Little League leadership, but our community to see how that looks. The replacement of the Platten building, again, that's kind of like a 50-year plan. If you think about the history of bond issues in this district, it's about every 10 years. So I think the next one, you have to start looking at that, and there's a lot of conversation that will come with that. The site leveling plan to 592, that's this hillside over there. A lot of engineering work has been done there. We will need a partner in that. That cannot be just a district expense, but there is some value to that land and some potential there that we'll be educating our community about as we move along. The possible addition of an ag program. Ag is a very general term. I grew up in Dexter. We had a thriving, what you'd call ag FFA program. Here it would be more like industrial, like welding and things, opportunities for kids. But we have to look at that option as well. An alumni plaza at the football and track stadium, and also a possible playground for use after hours. I think there's some things we're looking at. So that's the plan. And as we go to the SWOT analysis later, if you have comments or questions, we can certainly add that in. I'm going to kind of get through this because I think this is exciting to look at. Unfortunately, I think to help AM traffic as a whole, we're just going to have to be some physical changes, and that would come in the form of a bond issue at some point. I did want to kind of give you a glimpse of some things, and we have several variations we've turned into. Mr. Ebosalt and his crew, who did a wonderful job with this facility, by the way, is that additional row, and if you look at number A up here, or number A, I did go to Dexter. We can tell the difference. But anyway, letter A up there, additional row from Blue Jay Way to Highway 61. That is that cut. It's not to scale, and it's not to infringe on anybody's property. I just put that in there as a template, but you can kind of see, you know, putting a road in there to help alleviate some of that traffic in the going in and out of the high school. And then if you go down to B, that is the intersection of 61 and Dueling Hollow. And I totally respect the surveys the MoDOT has done. I mean, outside of our AM traffic and what used to be our PM traffic, that and events leaving, that area is pretty quiet at the end of the day. I get that there's probably not a justification on their end, but I also know the reality of it, going back to Ms. Hollenberg's statement of we're the experts on R-VII, and it always makes me nervous being that line coming from the south to come into school in the morning if one of my kids isn't quite ready on time. Getting behind that traffic to see the one car turn right and the one behind it being impatient and zooming through to cut through because it's going to get somebody someday. The only benefit is I don't think it'd be a high collision impact, but still nonetheless, it's kind of the wild, wild west down there if you're not careful. And then C is that area. That's really where a lot of our, I think, problems happen in the morning because of all the different left-hand turns and the different timing of things. That is the area in front of Selma Church down by the Danby Gym. I think there's something you could do short term, but I think if you're looking long term, it would probably have to go away. So I don't know about, we're going to look at those options, and that's where Vince will be a big. I just wanted to give you a snapshot that we are really working at this and going along with what Ms. Watson said. What can we do as our community to help the traffic issues and keep our kids safe? We have a responsibility as well. Again, we don't have that city to really, back us up on that. And we have to do it ourselves, but there's a lot of thought, a lot of great conversation going on about this. I want to finish up with the instructional resources. Last year's SWOT analysis, it was mentioned over and over, and I went in and highlighted. If you had a chance, if you haven't seen my video on this and you're interested, I would take a peek at it. It goes a little more detail. But the mental health services were mentioned in all four, and then additional counselors. So we just, I do like pulling the emotion out of it, pulling all the and just looking at the numbers. So the allocation of our mental health and special education staff this year was something that really stood out to us. So the changes, briefly, and it's explained more in that video, is that Telegraph now has a full-time counselor. Before, our counselor was splitting between the two buildings, so you had a half-time in both. We moved a counselor there full-time. At Platten, they kept a half-time, so one person went to Platten. Our intervention specialist moved to a half-time position because I just felt like the need could be done with both. We'll be analyzing that. But Platten has a half-time counselor and intervention specialist now, so that helped increase some of the numbers of staff-to-student ratio. We did add a full-time special education teacher. We used to have 1.5 teachers. One teacher traveled between the buildings. I don't know if that's the right way to say that. You had a full-time at Platten, you had a full-time at Telegraph, and one person split. We now have 2 special education teachers at Platten, 2 at Telegraph, and I think that has helped with our situation there. And that, again, goes back to our SWOT analysis. A very simple philosophy of mine. I'm not going to go into it I believe this business on some level is very simple. How many good people can you hire to take care of our kids and get as few kids around them as possible? That's when great things has happened. That relates to classroom size. I could bore you to death with all sort of ACT studies I've done. The number one movement in ACT scores is free and reduced. That's stuff you can't control. What you can control, if at all possible, through your budgets and finances, is your class size. I'm giving a snapshot here of Telegraph Elementary. I felt like Telegraph maybe was a little bit underserved as far as our staffing, comparatively speaking to maybe some other buildings, so we took a hard look at it. The number I want you to look at is at the bottom, the staff-to-student ratio last year. Our student enrollment only decreased by 4, which it really isn't a big difference. But, we about 8/10 of a staff-to-student difference with the addition of the special education teacher and counselor is a big deal. It may not seem like a lot, but that's an extra staff member in the building helping take care of our kids, and we do look at that very hard. That's a little boring, I understand. We're going to get to the exciting stuff here. The strength and weaknesses, opportunity, and threat analysis. Essentially, you have the form. I would just recommend you maybe, if you don't put anything in, if you want to reference that. Essentially, with the information that you have tonight, principals, if you help me with those microphones again. What are the strengths that we have as a community? And maybe I'll go back to this form here, so you can look at some stuff. We have a lot of great things going on at Jefferson. We really do. And I go back to my opening statement of the first thing I ever dealt with was a head football coach. In the last couple of weeks, it's tough getting hit with these difficult situations, but this one's a whole lot more, we can work with that. The other situation I dealt with, that was a rough one. But what are some strengths here that we have in our district that we can continue to put down? You can type it in later, but what are some strengths we have here? Nothing. Ruben?
I would say our reserves. I feel better because we have healthy reserves.
Thank you. I'm going to piggyback a little bit off Karen. We did an analysis through the Blue Jay Foundation last year, and I think in a small school districts function inherently different than larger. That's a whole nother discussion. If you're really bored, you can read my dissertation. But anyway, we don't like doubling up resources. And one of the things the foundation looked at last year is what is the strength, and we call them student support groups, our PTO, the fundraising we do for our cancer Pink Week, our booster clubs. My goodness, we have great parent organizations helping our kids, and that is a strength. I want to make sure we get that identified in there. Mr. Jackson had the great idea to put that into our board session every month to make sure they have a voice if they want to share it. Anything else on strengths? Yes. Thank you for saying that. I was blown away. I'd never heard of them until I got to Jefferson. And those are some of the most amazing things I've ever seen in education. Thank you for saying that, Tara.
I want to say that one strength that we have is that we've looked at other activities for kids to do. Athletics like archery and air rifle, things that can get kids really involved.
Thank you. Bill?
Well, I've got a total of 5 grandkids going to school here, and so I visit every school every day, and the spirit is just outstanding at each school. They greet the kids as they come in, they know them by name, and they're just excited to come to school. So keep up the good spirit.
Thank you.
I was going to say passionately committed employees. There are a lot of employees that have been here a long time that know these kids by their names, and new ones that are coming in that are inspired by the ones that have been here and put forth that effort.
Thank you. Took a lot of pride at the high school those years when we'd have somebody transfer in, and after a couple of weeks, on their own, a lot of parents or kids would come up and say, man, your staff really cares about us. And to hear, if you were in part of the class of 2013, we had a graduate who was kind of a knucklehead here, I guess for lack of a better term, really talked about, he said, looking back, the impact the staff had on me, and he said they treated us all like people and took care of us. It was a pretty powerful statement, and it was a pretty cool moment the other night. So thank you for sharing that, both of you. We have a wonderful technology director, if we could put that. Wayne, you got anything to add? Wayne got us through a tough time thank you. Wayne got us through such a tough time last spring with that power outage. I learned a lot that night, too, to maybe just go in and just pull the plug, if nothing else. But we limped to the end and had such a smooth transition out of it. And, of course, there's always hiccups. So, Wayne, thank you to you and Andrew for what you do. That was not fun. Anything else on strengths? I encourage you to, if you think of something later, please use that QR code and punch it in. Let's talk about weaknesses. I'm going to go ahead and start the first one. The Ameren, the flux with Ameren has to be on there. Rich, yes, sir.
You've got too many outside influences. I'm sorry.
You're okay. That's a great statement.
Well, my point was basically you're not in charge of your future. Other people are dictating to you what it's supposed to look like. You know, you need to find a way to basically either turn the table and, you know, I'm not sure how you do it, but, you know, you've got to find a way of regaining control.
Thank you. What else on the weakness? I will tell you this too before we go any further. One thing I forgot to put in here is that I think our directors and our principals have been more actively engaged in the strengths and weakness analysis since last spring moving forward. So I didn't want the community to think that we just show up and just, you know, we actively are looking for this all the time. And we have different lists out there that we're looking at. I looked at different things to put on there. Some of it I didn't think was relevant just for the fact that sometimes just like buying a house, there's just certain upkeep you have. But this group, I mean, we've got a dishwasher RFP coming this month, next week, that'll be recommended to the board. They have gone through and kind of taken the mantra, I really want you to look at the weakness part of this. What surprises do we have? We need to get that in order. We got the safety grant approved. There's to be some things that will help with our budgets through that. Delana did a great job and Ann on the preschool, getting that approved through our grant process to help us with preschool monies. That'll be mentioned next week at the board meeting. If there's anybody have anything else on weaknesses? My favorite term is opportunity. What sort of opportunities do we have at Jefferson R-VII? I'm going to speak a little bit for the things our principals and academic executive director have been working on, and that is really streamlining our resources K-12. I don't know if I want to put anybody on the spot, but the R-VII program has opened a lot of doors for us. Again, small school districts function differently. When you have a high school English teacher who's responsible for all your ELA 2 scores, it's not like going to a larger district where they have teams of people working together looking at that data. They're kind of the lone individual there. And really the R-VII has helped our teachers, I think, bridge that gap from the deficiencies they're seeing in the classroom, the students, and then moving directly to the source instead of using a test, the teacher deciding what the source is and trying to fix it that way. Am I kind of right on that analysis? So I think opportunities is to continue to streamline and use our resources together. From a budget standpoint and a technology standpoint, streamlining is never a bad thing. And that's something we'll be continuing to look at to make sure we're giving our teachers and students the best opportunity through those. Any other opportunities? Any threats?
Salaries for receiving teachers. We're losing a lot of new teachers for people who are leaving for salaries.
I'm going to piggyback off that too because I get to meet with superintendents. And I'm just going to speak very bluntly. And maybe it relates to something maybe I saw recently about, if you've watched Netflix, the Tim Tebow Florida Gator thing, where Tim was born and, you know, there was a lot of, and his parents always told him, you're special, you're special. And he said, after a while, you start to believe it. I think that works the other way as well. I think one of the things I've been very disappointed in after COVID was maybe the approach by things out there about how bad education is. And that's not true. I do think as educators we have to be very cautious, and I love our mantra here is to teach kids how to think, not what to think. I think we have to be that in education. But it is repetitive all the time, and I think that's having a toll on our teachers as well. Anytime you're knocked on, you know, we got really punched in the face in education with COVID and just trying to figure out in uncharted waters, and to come out of that and have a completely new, you know, scoring system about how we're judged, and the two weren't even the same. You know, you're talking about trying to judge, you know, an NFL quarterback in the 1970s as a good quarterback. The rules are completely different. It's just not even the same. It's not even the same race you're running when you look at that. And all of a sudden, all these schools went from, on the old system, being seen as very quality schools to really just dropping. You know, the whole system changed. And then you just hear all the different threats that come on about, you know, I don't think they're poor intended, but it's really putting a lot of pressure and making this business and not a lot of fun. And I'll stand by this statement, and there's data to support it. Jan would probably be a great one to back this one up. I'm putting you in the spot. I'd say 8 years ago, if you heard a teacher talking about retiring at 25 years, your immediate thought was, what's wrong? Is your health okay? It was so unusual. You just didn't hear it much. Every once in a while. After COVID, I just hear it all the time. How can I get to 25? That's a bad place to be. I think it's, you know, we have, and sometimes in education, we're our own worst enemies. And I'm not pinning blame on one person, but I think it's sometimes more than salaries. Salaries are definitely legitimate. But our society right now is really tough on families, on educators. It's a tough place to be. I do think it will cycle back, and I'm hoping Jefferson can be one of those lead places to do it. So thank you, Stacy. Mm-hmm. Sub bus drivers. Yes. I mean, we're holding our breath. We have the positions filled. Yes, sir. Yes. Go ahead.
Somebody worked the day, worked the AM, and somebody worked the PM.
Amy, go ahead.
We've done double routes before. Splitting the shifts you're talking about.
Well, I mean, like maybe some guy wasn't mind working the AM shift, but he doesn't want to work the PM or vice versa. So you may have to hire two people to do that, but
We'd still need more drivers. Right now, I'm actually an ELDT trainer, and I've not had a single phone call for anybody to come and try and train to get their CDL. Not one person. I've not even had one person call me that's got their CDL, and I've handed out cards to people that don't have a job right now, and they have their CDL, and they're just not interested in driving a school bus. What he's saying about what the way we're living right now, people are very hard on educators. They're very hard on bus drivers, and people don't want to deal with it. They don't want the responsibility of it. They honestly don't. I've heard it more than one time. We've done double shifts before, but even then it would require me to have more drivers and bigger buses because we don't buy the same size passenger buses that we used to have. My first bus was an 84 passenger. My last bus was a 71. So it can carry less kids. So I need more drivers and more buses to be able to do more shifts.
But when you put an application out for a bus driver, do you say he has to do the AM and the PM?
Well, no, because that's never been offered to me to give one or the other.
No, he has to do them both, correct?
Oh, correct. I thought you were asking if I have ever offered just one or the other.
No, what I'm saying is maybe if you did just offer one or the other, maybe you could get somebody to work the AM shift and then a counterpart to work the PM shift. Maybe somebody doesn't want to work both. I don't mind coming in working the AM because I've got the rest of the day off. But I don't want to sit around all day wait for 3 o'clock to come where I have to go pick up the kids. So maybe somebody else says.
Then that's a great idea, but I'd have to have more than one driver. If I wanted to put that out there, yes.
Yeah.
Because right now I could tell you the people that want the 4 hours, they're not going to give up, 2 hours. They're not going to share a route with somebody. And then you're also getting into the technical parts of sharing children. So you've got a different AM driver, a different PM driver. Already now, parents get upset when they have a sub driver because you're switching drivers back. There's a lot of moving parts, but I would be more than willing to have somebody. If I had two people come to me right now and said, I'll drive AM and I'll drive PM, I'd go straight to him and say, I have two people that are willing just to work 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening each. But most people won't do that because they want the full 4 hours. They're not just going to come in for 2 hours.
And the other
of
thing
pay.
too is by driving the 2 shifts, you do get the benefits.
Yes.
There's a benefits package that not all districts offer. But we have a very nice insurance package that even the bus drivers have access to. I will tell you this, Amy and Jackie, since they've taken over, have looked at so much information to try to improve, be more efficient, make the process for the bus drivers much more manageable. Her attitude towards things has been unbelievable, kind of her first leadership role. And I think we're sensing that. But I will tell you that it is across the board. And I understand it's not just education. There's a shortage of officials. At some point, you have to take a hard look and say, what can we offer our kids if the adults aren't stepping up to help out? We would gladly take any parent that wanted to drive a bus just strictly for the games to help alleviate that load because the shifts in the evening. I appreciate the fact that Ms. Hollenberg said, the activities we want to add, but people don't always put two and two together that means more bus routes, that means more individuals to cover those. And it is a challenge. Now, I go back to my original statement and where I've been. I'd rather be dealing with that than what I originally dealt with as a head football coach. I think that we're willing to look at any ideas, and that may be something we look at. And I think sometimes these things go in shifts and cycles. I've been in this business long enough to know that sometimes you have a tough time finding certain teachers, and all of a sudden there's a shift in the economy. People are looking for jobs, and so they want to get back into education. I do think in this community, if we stay positive about our conversations and understand our groups are working awfully hard, not just at Jefferson, but at the schools in Jefferson County or St. John County, you know, I think that also paints a more positive light on it. We've just gotten to a point in our society where everybody wants that instant gratification. They don't want to deal with adversity. Well, my goodness, I go back to the two guys I watched, you know, go from undrafted free agents in the NFL. They dealt with adversity every day. The people who are successful, we've got to teach that skill. I go back to those four guiding parts of our, you know, portrait of a graduate. If we can teach those skills, our kids will be unbelievable. If we keep telling everything will be okay and we don't want them to have any adversity, that's kind of where we're getting in a society. So, yes.
Were you saying you had your CDL? Oh, never mind. I was just checking.
We do have that noted, though, to look at those that as a possibility. Absolutely. It's not a bad idea at all, and that may be what we have to do at some point. Yes, ma'am.
So one of the threats I think I don't know, that seems to be very near and dear to my heart is that if the Hardy industry comes in and they get this abatement, and just like we can't find teachers, bus drivers, we can't find nurses, we can't find a lot of workers, how are they going to find employees? And ultimately, you know, maybe they get this fabulous building and maybe they have a million truck drivers. But if they don't have the folks that are going to work in their industry, I have concerns about like us leaning on how much, you know, revenue we're going to potentially get from them, just because I don't know. I grew up in a town in the middle of Missouri, and just north of us by 20 miles, there was a plant built to manufacture dog food, and they got a huge tax abatement, and 3 years in, couldn't find workers. Plant closed, huge carcass of a building left behind, and you know this school district was hoping to get all the money, no more money, and so you know that school district was hurting, and you know 4-day school week and the whole thing, just disaster. So that is what I mean. I hope never happens in this area. So I think it's a huge threat.
And Kate, maybe I can summarize that. The shovel's not in the ground yet, and there is uncertainty to that. And I keep coupling back to, you know, the threat here is the uncertainty with our school budgets, even currently with the Ameren situation, bridging that gap into James Hardy. Believe me, I lost a lot of hair. No, I didn't either. I was done before I even started the job. But I do lose a little sleep over that, thinking about that, waking up in the middle of the night going, you know, it's probably why I held off the superintendency as long as I did, and maybe even really never considered it. But like I said, Jefferson's a unique place. It's a special place. The one thing we have going for us, and part of the decision for me to take the position, is that, and I want to be careful about comparing other places, but there will be a population of people living here. Just because industry closes up and leaves, there will still be people that will live, and our student population, in theory, should not drop. That is a benefit. So how that looks, if the industry, let's say Hardy fails or doesn't materialize like we hope, and Ameren, we'll have to shift to more of a state-funded formula here. And honestly, at some point, as our reserves start to drop, we'll have to go to our community and look at raising things. That was the original plan as Ameren without the potential of Hardy. So yeah, there's a lot riding on it for this district. And I'm hoping that through this, the conversations I've had with so many people individually, as we get this committee together, we can better educate our community on the pluses and minuses. You know, my true mentor in this business years ago said, things are never good as they seem and things are never as bad as they seem as an administrator. Just always remember that. And that's kind of how I approach it. It's trying to get too far ahead of things, but also understand it's probably not as bad as things seem. So there would be alternative solutions to fill that in. But it's a point well taken. The shovel's not in the ground yet. Yes.
One of the threats that I see as a teacher and a parent of graduates here, but with all these people coming, they're not going to just live right there where the Hardy plant is. They're probably, you know, maybe a few going to move to R-VII, and probably some are going to have kids. And so what are we looking at the possibility of our class sizes rising and classrooms maxing out and buildings maxing out on classrooms to even fill and things like that?
Outside of the Hardy thing, this has been actively discussed at prior CSIP meetings and internally extensively. There are certain plots of land out here, if they were to flip and become residential, absolutely. I mean, if you think about the short-term uncertainty, if Hardy comes and no matter what, like that's a good thing for this school district. But long-term, absolutely. And that's the burden sometimes you face when you are abated, is if that growth happens too fast, how do you feel that financially, get your buildings. There's a lot to that process. We have some good people in this community that really understand that and know where those properties are and are watching it like a hawk for us, that I think are going to be a little bit more pronounced as we go forward. But again, I go back to maybe this slide right here. This is an important slide. And this might be as an important thing because, on another boring subject, a lot of times rural schools build the building, but they don't think about the roads. We're on the brink of being able to not have any sense of our roads. Vince said we're close, but we're still able to, because I feel like on some level, if the telegraph building were pointed a certain way and Danby were flipped, our roads would really flow. But they don't. But I still think they're salvageable, and I think the road planning going forward is critical for this school district for that long-range planning, because the roads aren't just looking at the traffic now. It's also looking at where would that replacement, and it's not replacing the Platten building as a K2 building, it's replacing the Platten building as a structure. So the grades may go to different buildings depending on what you want to do. There's a lot of different planning for that. But where, if we are building the roads the right way now, where would that building go? And that's part of this consideration as well. So yes, we are looking at it. I know enough about this building where different classrooms can go on pretty quick. I mentioned the cafeteria expansion. That's not a huge expense, but it's it could be a pretty quick fix out there. The high school was built to expand up to a certain point. And in all fairness, our student population hasn't grown a ton in the past 10 to 12 years. If there's no growth and Hardy comes in, we're sitting in great shape. It's if we get hit with massive growth when they come in, when we could have some issues. But that's why we're here tonight, and we are looking at all this stuff. And I'm hoping the strength of that committee going forward is to really take a harder look at this. Great conversation. I appreciate it. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Blindingly obvious, Crystal City's got annexation in mind. What's to stop them?
I think that's where that goes to the committee. I don't have a great answer for you.
I think about the castle grounds.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Well, if you worry about that, though, it doesn't change the school district. You have Jefferson School District. If Crystal City annexes it, it doesn't mean those kids go to Crystal City School.
That's the deal. It's like what goes in on the grounds if that flips into residential, how that looks, and how that growth impacts the district. I mean, years ago when I was working at St. Dominic, they had just built Fort Zumwalt West, and Highway Inn, I think it was still like a 2-lane road out, and Wing Haven didn't exist, and I was only there 4 years. And Fort Zumwalt West, the first year I worked at St. Dominic, already had what they call learning cottages on it. They had trailers out there for the overflow. That's where we don't want to be, Bill. That's what we want to avoid. And that's why there's such passion to look at those abatements to say, if the growth comes. If it doesn't, it may not be a big deal. If there's other things that help offset it, great. And again, it's like Rich said on a lot of different levels, it's just the unknown. All we can do is prepare and do the very best we can, and then at the end of the day, the chips will fall where they may. This community is passionate about its kids. We will find a way to educate them. We will do that.
You keep talking about the abatement. The abatement is 20%, and it's only on the real estate. It does not abate the personal property, and those buildings are going to have a whole lot more personal property value in them than there are on the real estate.
But that hasn't been shared with the public either. You know what I mean? Like, we went to that meeting and the number was not given to us, in all fairness.
But you know it to be a fact.
Yes.
Okay, well then you share it.
Well, I did put it out. 12 million over the 20 years of personal property is what they're projecting.
Right.
But that wasn't done up front either that day.
Hey, Bill, I think everybody, I guess the big elephant in the room is Crystal City annexed a piece of property, you know, they abated taxes in another school district. And that got a lot of people out here upset. So, I mean, that's the big elephant in the room. So I guess going forward is like, you know, Dr. Haug said, he would like to have a seat at the table, you know, so he knows what's going on. Not get it thrown in his lap, you know, and not a meeting at the library that was 2 years ago, you know, over a traffic study. Yeah, I mean, nobody knows that, you know, and like you said earlier, a lot of deals get done in the dark. Well, it's not going to be dark anymore, Bill. It's going to be a light. We will shine the light, and we will move forward with this to help everybody understand what's going on. And I think that's a fair assessment from pretty much everybody in the room. I could be wrong. You know, we just want to know, you know, so, I mean, I'm all for it. I love growth. One thing I don't want to see is Crystal City annex 10 acres of ground, put in 550 low-income apartments, and then abate it, and then we don't get any taxes, but we got 500 kids. That could be an issue. Right, and going forward, I think we will be informed.
Thank you.
And don't tell me I'm just the messenger. I'm trying to help out here, okay?
Bill, I'll be honest, you know, I'd rather us talk about it, and I know my staff, I know how our meetings flow that people don't see, and what Andrea, Alex, Jason Dreyer, Debbie Runze, Lori Holdinghausen, we'd sit in a meeting, our board's gotten the same mantra, we'd rather look foolish in here than foolish out there. I understand this is a public forum. I'm glad you're speaking, and I'm glad Jason's speaking, and I'm glad people are bringing this out. I think it's been very respectful this evening, and I hope we can continue to do that. And there's information you're going to hear you're not going to want to hear, or there's information you're going to hear you're going to be super excited about. It ultimately comes back to, you know, we are educators. You know, I did not get in this business to be a businessman. That's not who I am. And I know that's a lot of the people that I work with. We see it differently. And then go into that world of people who do look at business, which I do respect. And I think our original letter to the community over there at Crystal City was, and James Hardy was, we respect your positions. Please respect ours too. And honestly, James Hardy's not here yet. I'm excited about them coming. I think that if anybody's going to be on that land, like I said earlier, I think it's a great company to be out there. But we still have to play each other in games on Friday nights. And we still have to look at each other in the eye. And I love going, I think Crystal City is a beautiful town. They have a lot of great business up there, and we want to do that stuff. We are here. We've always been here. And we need to keep working together. And I think my message that night to Crystal City, we've had those kids on our campus. They have helped us out in the darkest hour. We have fought together on a lot of things that we have done. I think the schools probably set a better example for things than maybe some other entities, just because we can always say we're helping kids, and it's maybe an easier avenue. But I'm really hoping that's what happens going forward. And I'm hoping James Hardy's a great partner in this. I understand and appreciate people at any point they could have walked from this deal for whatever reason. I know that's a big headache and stress on individuals trying to get them here. I'm not bemoaning that fact. But the fact is, I keep going back to the one concern. And again, I don't cry about it. I don't say poor us. But the fact is, you do have taxpayers out here. Their school district was abated, and there was nobody at the table on this last one. And it's just the nature of living in R-VII, right? I mean, you pay a little extra, live out here, have a little extra land, have a little peace and quiet. Sometimes government's great, sometimes it's not. And right now, in this situation, it wasn't great to have that around. And other times, we're glad we don't have it. And that's the life, that's the way it is. I think through the committee, I hope to better educate our community. I'm going to wrap this up. You've got your QR codes if you think of something later. Thank you for giving us your time this evening. Jefferson's a great place. Thank you for being here. We are going to slip into executive session to do a few hires, and we're going to keep that very brief. Board, if you want to step back. Jimmy, you've got to close this thing out here, don't you? Making you work, man.
That's all I do, right? First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. I really appreciate all your input. I'm going to move us over to executive session. So if I can get a motion to move the executive session for the purposes of, my paper is messed up here, SS 13. Who's the motion? Mike? Chris? Mike, all right. Got that, Andrea? Roll call, please. Yes. All right. We're going to take a short break here and move to another venue for us.
We will go back to the green room.
Okay.
Troy, if you
So